Welcome back to Hormones in the Body, Lesson 2, where we're going to be covering the female reproductive hormones and their basic role on your cycle and your body. Let's get into it. So your menstrual cycle is just that. It is a cycle. It functions in a cyclical rhythm approximately every 24 to 36 days, and the average being actually 29 days. Each healthy cycle involves ovulation, where typically one egg is released, and this helps to prepare our body for pregnancy and helps to make progesterone. So ovulation is a vital sign of health, just as blood pressure, heart rate, and temperature are, and this reflects the health of your entire body. So what actually are hormones? Simply, hormones are messengers, and your organs produce and release a variety of different hormones, all with their own unique function. These travel through the bloodstream, acting as messengers to deliver information from one organ to another organ. This communication system is absolutely essential for maintaining hormone balance in your body, and when disruption occurs and the ability for these hormones to communicate is impaired, imbalances arise and often leading to symptoms and dysfunction. So, your reproductive cycle relies on hormone communication between your brain and your reproductive organs, aka your ovaries. These are the main reproductive hormones: FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, also known as luteinizing hormone. Both originate from the brain and prompt the ovaries to mature an egg and generate the hormones estrogen and progesterone. For each hormone, there needs to be an adequate level attained to trigger the release of the next hormone for regular cycles to occur. So this image here is your menstrual cycle, and you can kind of split it up into two main phases. On the left-hand side, we have our follicular phase, and then we have that hump in the middle, which is ovulation, and then the right side is the luteal phase, which occurs after ovulation. The two main ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone, take the lead during a certain phase. So estrogen takes the lead in the first part of the cycle before ovulation, aka your follicular phase, and then progesterone takes the lead in the second part of the cycle after ovulation, aka the luteal phase. You can see here the different effects estrogen and progesterone have on the body, and they also have a huge influence on general reproductive health and short and long-term health as well. So estrogen tones and contracts the uterus, proliferates your endometrium, aka it makes it grow, it proliferates your breast tissue, helps bone formation, it dilates and increases your blood vessels, it can increase blood clotting, elevate your blood sugar, cause fluid retention, and stimulates brain cells. Normal levels of estrogen promote well-being, and high levels can increase anxiety. After ovulation, we make the majority of our progesterone, which relaxes the uterus, it helps maintain the endometrium, normalizes breast tissue, it helps with bone maintenance, relaxes your blood vessels, normalizes blood clotting, normalizes blood sugar, it maintains and heals your brain cells, and it's also a natural diuretic. So progesterone helps promote healthy sleep, relaxation, and decreases anxiety. So basically, progesterone minimizes and balances out the effects of estrogen, and this is why it's so important to be regularly ovulating, because we can't make progesterone without ovulating. Together, estrogen and progesterone also influence your uterus, and together they create the lining that builds up over your cycle, which you shed at your period or will make you a nice cozy home in case you become pregnant. Estrogen is a proliferative hormone, which means it builds the lining of the uterus, and progesterone is a maintenance hormone. So it helps to maintain the uterine lining and create secretory glands to both prepare and nourish the lining for a possible pregnancy. Estrogen and progesterone also influence the cervix, which you can see and feel through different phases of your cycle. Estrogen causes your cervix to produce stretchy, clear, and lubricative mucus. Progesterone stimulates the cervix to make a G-type, dense mucus, showing up as that dry sensation. So just to reiterate that last slide, estrogen helps to grow the lining, where progesterone helps to stabilize it and nourish it. Estrogen also causes the cervix to make that fertile quality mucus, and progesterone creates that dense, thick mucus which can block sperm. But both together help prepare the lining for fertilization. So as mentioned before, each hormone is required in sufficient amounts to lead to the next trigger in the cycle. When all hormones rise to sufficient levels, ovulation can occur, which leads to the production of progesterone. So FSH from the brain stimulates immature eggs in the ovary, each in their own follicle, which is kind of like a small sac, and it stimulates these to grow. So one egg will become dominant and continue to grow and mature in the ovary, and this growing follicle produces increasing amounts of estrogen, which triggers LH to release the mature egg from the follicle during ovulation. After ovulation, this now empty follicle is transformed by LH into the corpus luteum. This gland will now make progesterone for the remainder of the cycle. So in this diagram, you can see the growth of the follicle as FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone, is acting on it. Once we get that mature egg, it's going to start to produce an increasing amount of estrogen, which then leads to the rupture of the follicle at ovulation. This now empty follicle is turning into the corpus luteum, which makes progesterone for the remainder of your cycle. And once that egg is ovulated, it's going to stay in the fallopian tube for up to 24 hours. If fertilization does not occur, this ovulated egg will disintegrate within 12 to 24 hours, and the lining will shed approximately 12 to 14 days later at the end of your luteal phase once your hormones drop. So once estrogen and progesterone drop at the end of your cycle, that is what is leading to your period. And the reason why they drop is because the health of the corpus luteum, which we are making from the empty follicle again, that is making progesterone, can only last for so long. So the breakdown of the corpus luteum leads to lower progesterone levels, and you see how at the end of the cycle there it's dropping off. That's why that's occurring. In this chart, you can see how estrogen and progesterone influence your uterine lining. So you can see how in response to estrogen, the lining is growing there. Progesterone helps to stabilize it, and at the end of your cycle, it causes it to shed. Generally, higher circulating estrogen levels leads to thicker uterine lining and preparing it for possible implantation and fertilization. So in this chart, you can see the different cervical mucus patterns that happen in response to estrogen and progesterone, and each of these different patterns is either going to help or hinder sperm survival. Again, here you can see the different cervical mucus patterns. You can see that dry type right after your period. This leads into the estrogenic type mucus, the EL and the ES around ovulation. And then after ovulation, you see your G mucus, which is again dry. Just a little recap on what we covered. So FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, recruits those follicles to grow and mature. The dominant follicle produces an increasing amount of estrogen, which stimulates the uterine lining to thicken and the cervix to produce cervical quality mucus. Increase in estrogen stimulates LH, so luteinizing hormone, from the brain, which triggers ovulation and the formation of the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum produces progesterone and also stabilizes and nourishes the uterine lining and stimulates the cervix to make dense, thick mucus. That is all for this lesson, and in the next section, we're going to be going into more detail on the reproductive hormones and your cycle.